Redditors who metal detect. What has been your coolest discovery? I bought my son a kid-size one for his 6th birthday. I'm the one that uses it though. I feel pretty ridiculous walking around with it, but I just can't help myself. My family can be little turds when I get it out and constantly throw coins in the sand when detecting on a beach just to see me get excited. It's kinda scary how many rusty nails and razor blades I find on beaches. I've found a few rings but pretty sure they're just costume jewelry. Lots of coins too, but mostly rusty nails. So many rusty nails. My uncle is a notorious idiot. We had a cabin by a stream, and he decided to buy a metal detector and see if he could find some gold. He picks up some rocks and scans over them. The detector goes off and he gets super excited. He does the same with multiple rocks, and now has a pile. Assuming the rocks must have deposits. He'd been at it for an hour or two before he realized that he was holding the rocks with his left hand and scanning with his right. He was detecting the gold wedding band on his finger. Edit: a lot of people are saying that gold wouldn't be picked up by a metal detector. I honestly don't know one way or the other, but I doubt he knew that. Knowing him, I also doubt very much that his wedding ring was made entirely from gold. Edit: 2 metal detectors definitely pick up gold. Also, gold jewelry is pretty much always mixed with other metals. I appreciate everyone who scienced this. Edit: 3 No. My cousin's name is not Kevin, but I just read that post, and OP said Kevin wasn't his real name. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. A pre-Revolutionary War graveyard in my backyard in Connecticut. Got a metal detector to locate nails in some 250-year-old chestnut flooring I was refinishing in an old colonial I bought. Took my 5-year-old son out to the backyard to play with it. Found out I had 6 people buried in the back corner of my yard. Lead-lined wooden caskets show up really well. State came in, made all kinds of nasty noises about things and then just sort of disappeared. Turned out they were the original settlers in my town and no one knew what to do about the graves, so we all just pretended like they weren't there. My friend Dean found a bicycle buried under the sand at a beach. An entire bicycle. It needed cleaning. And a new tire, along with a new chain. But after that it was as good as new. I went metal detecting with my dad on an isolated island he used to play on as a kid 50 years ago. We found a hatchet head about 18 inches down that he lost as kid building a fort. Maybe not the coolest find for anyone else, but it was awesome to see my elderly father instantly transported to his childhood. A few years ago, a guy on Reddit asked Reddit if anyone had a metal detector he could borrow to find his wife's lost wedding ring. I lived local to him at the time and had one I never really used. I offered help. Showed up at the dude's house and we ended up finding the ring in about 10 minutes. That was the first and last time I ever used that metal detector. You Joe Lithium, if you're still out there, I hope you're doing well and your wife hasn't lost her ring again. The year was 1996. I was 22 and just bought my first metal detector. I was at my girlfriend's house and asked her mom if I could use it in the backyard. She says sure and then starts telling me about a precious ring her oldest daughter had lost in the backyard in 1979. It was a family heirloom and was missed very greatly. She pulls out home movies that were made the day it was lost. It was at a family reunion. Well, I saw in the movie where the girl was mostly hanging out. I walked outside, turned on my detector and found the ring that had been lost for 17 years in about 2 minutes. Found a full 6-pack of beer in a guy's pockets. I was working security at a country music festival. They gave us handheld ones to check suspicious lumps. My wedding ring. 1. In the garden. Under some tomato starts. 2. In the garden. Mixed in with carrot seeds. 3. In my friend's backyard. Near the hammock I drunkenly fell off of. 4. In a massive leaf pile. 6 foot tall by easily 12 foot in diameter. At another friend's house. I need to get this thing resized. My uncle found an authentic Nazi SS officer's ring on the beaches of San Diego. Though in all honesty, the wild stories we came up with to explain why the ring ended up there is much cooler than the ring itself. Edit. RIP inbox. I'll try to get photos, but fair warning. There is a good chance he is out on the RV metal detecting somewhere, so it may be a few weeks. Edit 2. Here is the pic of ring and misc stuff he found. Looking at it again, it isn't an SS ring, I think, so feel free to take back your upvote. Less than a frame class equals Imgur album width equals 100% height equals 550 frame a border equals 0 src equals more than less than I frame a more than. A set of World War I medals, the ones that were given out after the war, belonging to RLT Rupert Frampton. Can't find anything about him on the Googles. I keep them in the box with the 2 sets I have from my great grandfather and step great grandfather. Edit. Wow. Some serious sleuthing going on in these comments. Thanks chaps and chapesses. As I mentioned to a couple of you, I'm traveling until Tuesday but will update here with some pictures of the medals as soon as I can. I'd love to get these back to his descendants. All help very much appreciated. Found a platinum ring with a diamond in it once. It wasn't shiny, as it had been under the sand for a while, but still pretty. I also have a large collection of old coins and artifacts. My personal favorite is actually 2 items found in the same field. 2 World War II bullets, one from some sort of ground-to-air rifle, the other from a plane that shoots things on the ground. I'm not actually sure what weapons or planes they're from. I'm not very educated on World War II weaponry unfortunately. I live at uni and my collection is at home, so here is an album I've posted before. It's not quite up to date but shows most of the cool stuff. Might get my parents to send me a photo of the ring. Edinburgh 2. A lot of people are asking. Any non-metallic stuff I found either lying on the surface of fields after they had been freshly plowed brings a surprising amount of stuff up if you are looking down, or whilst mudlarking, which is the activity of scouring the shore of the River Thames at low tide. Really good fun if you're a ducking loser into this kind of thing as I am. My dog once ate one of my mother's sapphire earrings. My dad went out with the dog every morning and used my metal detector to find it. My grandparents moved to Maine almost 25 years ago from Kansas City, MO, where my grandfather was a policeman with KCPD. They metal detect on the beaches near their house in Maine almost every week, and 4 years ago they found buried in the sand a ring. It was a police department ring from my grandfather's division. It was engraved with the officer's last name and belonged to one of his friends from the force, a man he hadn't spoken to in 20 years. My grandmother had his wife's phone number, so they called to tell them they'd found his ring. It turned out their family had gone on vacation in Georgia almost 15 years before, 5 years after my grandparents moved to Maine, and he had lost the ring while at the beach, and it turned up on a beach in Maine close to the one person in the whole state who knew him. They've also found other rings, including a few high school class rings they've returned to their owners, but all of those came from Maine or its neighboring states. I found a cannonball fragment from the War of 1812 on a Lake Erie beach. I know a man who grew up in Normandy in France right after World War II. As you can imagine, there were a lot of unexploded bombs left, so one day, he was around 8 years old, he and some friends go metal detecting and found one. They took it home and played a bit with it, as you can imagine. BOOM. He still has pieces of this bomb in his chest nowadays, and I think there were some lost fingers too. Don't play with bombs, kids. And fireworks too. My keys, which was the whole reason for buying the detector. My granddad isn't a Redditor, so I have to post this on his behalf. Some time ago my granddad, in his 70s at the time, was metal detecting with his crew. Oh, they have crews. When he heard a little beep, he had been metal detecting for about 40 years, so he knew he had something interesting. He dug and found a gold Philippi of Macedonia stater. He went over again and found another beep. Dug again. Another one. He repeated this a few times and found 967 of them in a clay bowl. There were also silver ingots. It was a hoard. The largest Iron Age hoard found ever in the UK. He called my nan and couldn't get a word out. He was in tears. He had found the treasure he had been searching for his whole life. He even made it into coin news. He is great. My granddad found a lead coin in a field. Apparently back in the day, farmhands used to be paid in these lead coins that they cashed out at the end of the week for real coins. This was to stop them from turning up to work drunk hungover every morning. Edit. Fixed spelling. Second edit. The token is from the 17th century. I have pictures if anyone is interested. Final edit. Here are some pictures. My father-in-law's gold wedding ring that he had lost almost 15 years before. I had detected the it out of the area that he told he had lost it in. Found literally dozens and dozens of pieces of junk over hours and hours of detecting and digging. Digging in clay. Sometimes digging deep. Every hit I get I pull something out. So my machine is working despite me being a rank noob. In the end, I don't find it. So of course I get the disappointed look and comments about my machine not working very well, with the obvious implication in the air that I failed. Now, I'm kinda pissed at myself and frustrated already. So yeah, I feel like it about it. A year or two go by and I decide to detect the garden area to kill some time and dig around with my detector on a nice fall day. The garden area is well over 200 feet away from the spot he had pointed to initially. Their acreage is just under 8 acres. So I wasn't really looking for the ring. But you never know, eh? So instead of doing a grid like you would when you seriously want to cover every inch of ground, because the garden is about 200 feet by about 50 feet and I was just pissing around, I just let my intuition lead me in a meandering route. I find a couple of pieces of junk and then I pull a gold looking ring out of the ground. This is about 10 minutes into detecting. I call my wife over and ask her if it's her dad's ring. Frankly, it looked thinner and smaller than I expected. She calls her mom over and her mom almost starts crying. They call him over and he almost starts crying. That day I was the hero. Very cool. For me anyways. That's how you get addicted to metal detecting. My girlfriend and I found a ring once on a children's playground area. It turned out to just be sterling silver. So nothing expensive. Never did find the owner. But I like to think some kid got dumped and threw their ring away. Lol. The most interesting thing I've found while using a metal detector on a beach was a steel horse show. It made me feel lucky. Coolest thing I found was a silver button weighing 2.1 gram from 1780s or so. The history behind it is amazing. But let me tell you something, my dad metal detects too and because of schoolwork I couldn't go with him for the day. The ducker find a golden coin who was otherwise unknown. It is a coin so rare that it's strange. Coin is from around 1560. If you know Dutch history you know that the 80-year war against the Spanish the coin was taxed with some kind of staple. This staple was also never used before. He sold it and got enough money to pay for my tuition. It's a lovely hobby, but don't expect to be as lucky as him. It takes time to plan and information. Countless times we look at things like strange, this hill seems out of place, and then we spend the next 3 days searching it. Found a Russian Kapitan saber from the Bulgarian-Turkish War. I found a class ring with year and initials. This was before internet, so I went to the local high school and got the old yearbook. 3 names matched the initials. Looked them up in the phone book for the owner and was able to return it 7 years after she lost it. I once found a stash of quarters hidden in a small wooded area as a kid with my buddies. It was about $20 worth. We took them and bought pizza and 2 liters at the Domino's on the corner. Edit. Leave for a calc test and everyone loses their minds. It was a 2 liter of Sprite in my case. Drank it all in one go and felt like I was gonna explode for an hour. Edit 2. No, I didn't check to see if there were silver quarters. But I know that pizza was the it. I used to live in Czech Republic and this stoner buddy of mine used to love detecting near ancient settlements, former Nazi bases, etc. He found several grenades, a bunch of silverware and crucifixes near some pilgrimage site. Lots of coins dating back to the Roman era. It was absolutely crazy. The Czechs have a forum that a lot of enthusiasts share their finds on. It's absolutely crazy. Some people find old tanks, weapons caches, etc. Their domestic Google Maps called MapCZ as a historical map overlay so you can see where former villages etc are located. This happened to my best friend. She lost her ring the day after she was proposed to at the beach in Los Angeles. She was crying and asked the lifeguard tower if there was anything they could do. They gave her a number to this metal detector guy named Harry. They said he was the best in town and not to call anyone else. So they give him a ring and he's there 20 minutes later with his metal detector. Old tan dude with long beach hair. Took him 5 minutes to find the ring. She offered to give him $200 cash. He said no thank you. Their happiness was enough for him. When we were in high school, my buddy and I were metal detecting around his dad's yard. Found a door to a small fallout shelter that the original owners of the house had built out of paranoia. Still stocked with several weeks worth of canned food, tools, medical supplies, and a radio. At the beach, my brother and I found a monogrammed sterling sliver money clip stuffed with $20 and $5 100s. Fortunately, it was buried in the sand far enough away from the ocean that the paper bills were still intact. We looked around, but the area where we discovered it was deserted. My husband had to rent a metal detector when he lost his wedding band in the backyard. He was stacking logs and took off his gloves for something, and it must have been flung out during that. Good news is that he found it almost right away in a pile of leaves. My wife would most definitely say her wedding ring. While we were dating, metal detecting was our hobby that we did together. Long story short, I made a heart-shaped plug, cut out piece of grass, and put a ring in it. Then I made her come dig it up. She loved it and we've been happily married for 2 years now. The remains of my neighbor's dad's pocket watch, dropped in the yard 50 years ago. Beyond repair certainly, but recognizable and somewhat satisfying to my neighbor, I hope. Mostly I find old farmyard rubbish because of where we live, but I'm happy to get that out of the ground too. Old leaf springs and axles, an axe head, a jalopy type hood. Sometimes the hit coincides with the old midden pile, where you'll find bottles and crockery and china as well. Found a 1915 barber quarter at the in-laws. 2. I found something that made a dude's day. Unlike most of you, my metal detector is used to check you into the emergency room. One time, this fellow kept making the detector go off near his abdomen. I wasn't satisfied, so I used our handheld metal detector wand. Turns out his pocket knife had fallen into a hole in his pocket into the inside of his jacket. He thanked me and explained his grandfather had given him the knife when he was a boy, and he was coming to see his grandpa in the ER. A 300 AD Roman coin I found on the Thames foreshore. It was full moon and a very low tide, so I stood almost in the middle of Thames. I can't wrap my head around how old the coin is. My personal experience of old is my grandfather, who is 2 generations away from me. Someone lost the coin 68 generations ago. That find put everything in a different perspective for me. When I read about Edward the Confessor, died 1066. I think it was so long ago. And then I think, wait, it's 700 years after someone lost the coin I'm holding in my hands. Not really cool, but I once found a big pink and purple dildo vibrator that was buried in a Ziploc bag. I covered it back up. Okay, so a decade later this still leaves me pretty salty. As a kid, I see a lady in the park with a metal detector. Being the curious 10-year-old I was, I decide to help her look for treasure. She is more than happy to oblige, and inside of 20 minutes, it starts going off. I help her dig and we find this hunk of metal. Nothing special, really, covered in dirt and rust. She decides she'll let 10-year-old me keep it and I am excited. I take it to the water faucet in the park and start cleaning it off, and it is stamped with some random letters and the moniker Hassler. I get out the flip phone and look it up on the slow as balls 3G internet. It was the shock absorber from a Ford Model T. I am ecstatic. I rush over to let her know what we discovered and she took it back. WTF. Metal detector lady, you said it was mine. Anyway, I got pissed off and went to tell my mom that some lady took my thing. And by the time we get back she was gone. Metal detector lady, if you read this, duck you. You crushed my 10-year-old spirit. Metal detected my grandfather's old land. The act alone meant a lot to me. Needless to say, he had a buddy who was a watchmaker and I ended up finding a watch fit to my grandfather's size with the watchmaker's mark on the back. I have all of his other watches, so it meant a lot to me to be able to find it. Found an entire skyscraper in New York. I'm a land surveyor. We use a metal detector to find metal pins set as property corners and nails we bury in the ground as control traverse points to occupy with a total station, GPS unit or what have you. The detector we use only responds to iron. but we still find some cool stuff sometimes. I've found animal traps, knives, a couple of axe heads, old refuse pits from long gone home sites that lead to some nice antique glass, etc. But my favorite find so far was a 4-pound meat cleaver buried right in the middle of a local town, at the corner of some guy's backyard. Edit, a word. My dad rented a metal detector because he lost his wedding ring doing yard work. He went over everything and finally moved to the compost pile in the back. Around that time, I got home from school or something and I see him with this weird contraption. I ask him what he was doing and he said he lost his wedding ring and was trying to find it. At that point I see something shiny and ask, is that it? It was. Anyway, I got to play with the metal detector the rest of the afternoon and found 2 really old, rusty Matchbox cars and an old Budweiser can. I still have the cars. Nothing great. Here in Wisconsin, the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, has essentially banned metal detecting on public land. There's not much you're going to find on private land because it's mostly farmers' fields that have never had many people in them. Edit, info on regulations and reasons, here, and here. In 2004, I found a gold Rolex Yacht Master in 7 feet of water off Salt Creek Beach in Southern California. Not me, but a friend in Northern California found a 6.07 pound, 2.753 kilo, gold nugget with his detector in July 2014. Edit, got about $400,000 for it. So, anybody want to recommend good metal detectors or brands for under $300? My first coin was a quarter from 1916. I dug one hole that had a dime from 1892, a wheat penny from 1909, and 2 Indians, one 1886 and one 1904. I found a car. I got a metal detector for Christmas when I was a kid. I wanted to use it right away, but there was still a lot of snow out so I waited until it melted. Once the snow was gone, I began to scan the ground around my parents' house. We lived in a rural area BTW, in hopes of finding something. I got some hits, an old nail, a piece of thin scrap metal, and a piece of old metal fence. Then it happened. I got a hit in my parents' old garden, uneven ground surrounding a large old walnut tree. I started to dig down and after about digging 5-7 inches down, my shovel hit something hard and I heard the sound of metal on metal. I hunched down and began to dig with my hands so as to not damage whatever I had stumbled upon. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was a purple metal Hot Wheels Mustang. I excitedly picked it up and brushed the rest of the dirt off with my hands. I still have it to this day on a shelf in my room at my parents' house. I'll never forget that day I found a car with my metal detector. TL. Doctor, I got a metal detector for Christmas when I was a kid and found a car buried in my parents' old garden. Update edit. Here's a link to pics of the car. I am back home from college and found it on a shelf in my room. Me and a friend were metal detecting in a small German village near the Dutch border. It was a grass field near a primary school next to a mill and a river. We were digging up a lot of scrap from the school kids like cans and foil but also some older coins. As we get closer to the road, which often means more scrap, I get a huge signal. Immediately I get disappointed because 99% of the time it is a large piece of foil or some other crap. I dig a nice round hole and I break the piece of earth with my hand only to find a big silver coin in a very good condition. The coin was a 12-Ihnen thaler from Hanover, 18th century. I hit up the local parks and usually sweep around picnic and party areas. One time I followed a washout down the side of a hill from a party area and found about $10 in quarters and a couple of $half pieces in a honey hole at the bottom of the hill. While not much money, it's still fun to start digging and keep pulling coin after coin out of a little 2 feet x 2 feet foot area. Couple hours of detecting bought my dinner that night. My husband metal detects. I've gone along occasionally as well because who doesn't like a good treasure hunt? Best thing that he's found is a taxi driver's pin from New York City with the driver's name, number and such on it from the 1920s or 1930s. It's nothing of real value but is in surprisingly good condition for being in dirt for as long as it was. Edit. Clarification of name on pin. Back in the 70s my dad bought a really expensive $350 was huge $sign back then. Metal detector. I used to take it out in the woods to what was rumored to be some sort of old settlement. But there was nothing there, at least to the naked eye. At that site I found a very old silver fork and spoon buried together in a hole. I read up and found that sometimes during cholera epidemics, when someone died they would bury silverware they ate with. There was an old dirt road, and in there I found a very old axe head. Based on its shape, it would have been handmade, and at least from the mid 1800s. In another spot I found an entire Franklin stove, all in pieces. I still have the old fork and spoon. And since it was the 70s, I also found about 150 million pull tabs.